Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here again with another Exade replay, coming to you with episode 11 of Kamen Rider Exade. Let's get right into it. So like I was talking about last week, it seems that we've come to a new chapter here in the story of Kamen Rider Exade. We're seeing a lot of new things get set up, and a lot of things getting ready to be taken away from us based off what we're seeing here. But let's go ahead and focus on the main central lesson, if you could say that, of this week's story. So if I had to encapsulate it, and they do cover this in the episode, the biggest issue that they want to cover in this week's episode is trust. The trust between a doctor and their patient, and then the trust between the four riders versus all of the bugsters. So on the patient end of things, it seems that Emu's new patient for this week happens to be a kid who's infected with a bugster virus, but in this case it happens to be an upgraded version of Salty, who some of you might remember was the first monster that he beat in episode 1. Throughout the course of the episode, Emu figures that much like how Dr. Kyotaro was to him when he was in the hospital, he should have that same sort of bedside manner towards this child. So what he decides to do is ask the mother, hey, what is this kid like? Does he like games? Does he like sports? What is he into? The base idea here being he wants to provide him with something that will either give him hope or reduce the stress, because of course, as we've already discussed here, stress is what makes the bugster virus grow. Now what's interesting to see about this is that we are also told that Emu's internship is up. He's got a week left and he's been there for about 3 months, which is about right given the time frame of the series, so beyond that he might become a full-fledged doctor. We'll have to see how that plays out. Now on the other side of things, the biggest player in this episode has to be Kuroto-dan again, with his major plan coming to fruition of a sort. So what we see happen is Kuroto-dan calls the four riders into his office telling them, hey, great job so far on defeating the bugsters, clearing the games, you've got one left to go, we need that one, and then we should be able to stop the bugster virus completely. Now that of course being the Shakariki sports gashot that Kamen Rider GENM has, but of course nobody but Kiriya Kujo knows that Genmu's identity is actually Kuroto-dan at this point. Now going along with this issue of trust is a big part of this episode amongst the writers. Emu wants to trust that Dr. Kyotaro didn't operate on him without his consent, Kujo wants to be trusted because he's the only one who knows the identity of Genmu, and Kuroto-dan wants everybody to trust him with the information that he's providing them without them knowing that he's actually playing both sides. Now to that end, Kuroto-dan further gives Emu reason to disbelieve Dr. Kyotaro, telling him this information that, oh, this is all, the bugsters came from him, the bugsters were his idea, he might have been the one who created them there in the health ministry. Emu doesn't want to believe that. Kujo doesn't necessarily make him disbelieve that, since he feels that he's been a little bit shady as well. Now of course all of this has to do with Kuroto-dan's plan, which apparently was to amass data, as we've seen him trying to get for the last couple of episodes. The last bit of the puzzle that he needs is information on death. Now, what exactly that means, we're not entirely sure. Most likely what it looked like, at least from the beginning of the episode, was that he needed someone to die, whether with the patient or some other means. So from the looks of it, Kuroto-dan had two ways of going about this. The first one, which seems to be the primary plan, is that he tried to get the kid from the beginning of the episode to basically keel over and die from the bugster virus, and then he would gain his data that way. But seeing as that didn't happen, he had to go with plan B. So going into that last fight, what it all boils down to is another 4-on-1 fight, this time Genmu versus all four riders, again using the power of Dragon Knight Hunter Z. They defeat him, and then the curtain is dropped. You see the man behind the curtain, you see that Genmu's identity is Kuroto-dan. He reveals it to everybody. The interesting thing being is that he appears to have turned this new gashot on himself to collect that death data, since apparently during the fight he was reduced all the way down to 0. His life bar is gone, he should be dead, but for some reason he's not. This apparently will play in very largely into next week's episode. Now as far as Kuroto-dan is concerned as a villain now, because we can now fully classify him as a villain, not just playing both sides like many other characters we've seen over the last couple of years, like in say Fourze or Wizard, with Tachibana over there in Fourze, or the White Wizard in Wizard. Here with Genmu, here with Kuroto-dan, we can see what kind of a villain he's going to be, because going into these next couple of episodes, Kuroto-dan doesn't have to worry about the pretense of being nice, about having to try and help out the CR. He can just fully focus on being a villain, being fully focused on being selfish, and focus on that completely and see how much he can help the bugsters, or the bugsters can help him, whichever way that they're going to play that. He tells the other writers that he's doing this to collect data to create the ultimate game, and really right now that sounds pretty generic because that's all we've got. As to what that exactly means, we're not sure. Does that mean he's going to build a bigger gashot? Does that mean that game is just a general term and he needs some sort of a larger plan? We don't know yet. From what we've seen though, I think I'm willing to watch it, because As far as the representation has gone, Kuroto-dan's been pretty charismatic, which is a good thing to have in a villain. As far as Paulette is concerned, Paulette hasn't hardly done anything except stand in for him earlier, a couple of episodes back, when he wanted to throw everybody off their trail. What I want to see is how the interplay between Paulette and Kuroto-dan plays out from here on, since now we are going to get that new Gasha, which we see teased at the end of the episode, Dangerous Zombie. There were a couple of interesting changes that I saw over this episode. Now, these are things that normally happen throughout the course of a Rider series, but now we're starting to see them here in episode 11. First thing I noticed was Emu tripping himself. He only did it twice this episode, once at the beginning for comic effect, and then a second time again for comic effect, but at least that one was plot related when he was trying to get a cake for the child he was taking care of. The other noticeable thing is that we're speeding up the process at which we see the Riders transform. When Emu goes from level 1 to level 3, we don't get the cutscene, we just see it happen right there in front of him. Now that's more traditional for Kamen Rider series, but now we're starting to notice that they're focusing less on the flashiness of what will get the kid to buy the toy. By this point, they either have the toy or the mom's already getting it for Christmas. Hey Dad, can you get me the new Rider belt? Okay, fine, I'll get it for you. That's already taken effect by this point. And as time goes on, we're going to see that less and less. It's going to take them less time to transform and more time to get into the action, get into the plot, get into the story. That happens every year, and that's just something to be expected. Now, going into next week's episode, we have to see what's going to happen next, based on everything that Kuroto-dan said there at the end, saying that there's an imminent outbreak. A lot of people are already infected, the virus just hasn't manifested yet, so we're trying to see what's going to trigger all of these other people, all these other patients that we'll probably see in the next coming episodes. Beyond that, there was the information that he gave out about the proto-Gashots in the conversations that he has there with Paulette at the end, saying that, oh, I've already used too many as it is, and this seems to be in reference to something going on specifically with Kuroto-dan, the idea that he was already dying before this last fight. So what exactly are they saying there? Was he experimenting on himself with the proto-Gashots? Was he developing something else to cure himself? We don't know yet. This, of course, is all conjecture until we clear this up, possibly with next week's episode. Now I know this is a lot of information to take in, and I'm really happy that we're getting all of this. Now I'm very happy that next week Genmu's getting that new form. I actually prefer the way it looks, but we'll see what happens next week. But you guys tell me what you think. Do you think it's about time Shakariki Sports got over to Exade? What do you think Kuroto-dan means when he says ultimate game? And do you think next week will be the last time we see Laser? God, I hope it's not. I actually like his character. But you guys tell me in the comments below. And of course, you can always find me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 11 of Exade Replay for episode 11 of the series, Who's That Black Rider? I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.